Chapel and Cox and Graziano Funeral Homes. Jenifer is here to discuss a sensitive subject we all need to talk and think about. Here now is Jenifer Graziano and Time to Talk.
Good morning, Westchester. It's 9 a.m. on Monday, and that means it's time to talk with me, Jen Graziano. I'm a licensed funeral director who oversees my family's funeral homes, Cox and Graziano of both Mamaroneck and Greenwich, and the Zion Memorial Chapel of Westchester. Every Monday, I come to you discussing important topics and sensitive matters that all of us need to pause and reflect upon at some point, and through this show, I hope to provide a platform to do so. If you're joining us this morning on 1460 WVOX, we'll take questions, comments, and calls to 914-636-0110. Good morning to the control room. And good morning, Facebook Live viewers. Happy to have you joining us for a live show. Been out a few weeks, but back with some really important information for you today. A very special show this morning that we dedicate in memory of a mutual friend to both my guest and myself, Pauline Cardillo, who lost her battle last week to ALS. And today's show is to raise awareness on this horrible disease, the impact it has not only on the patient themselves, but on their families, and ways that you can get involved and support the cause at large and perhaps anyone you know who is fighting this battle. So I welcome Chris Curtin from Compassionate Care ALS, CCALS. He is a senior family care liaison who works with families in the southern New England and northern Atlantic regions. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Jen. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I think this is a really important show to do. I had the pleasure and privilege of meeting you through the Cardillo family.
Yes.
But I want to get to know you a little better, understand your background and how you came to work in this organization.
So my journey with ALS started back in 2004. I'm a native of Larchmont, and one of my best friends, her name was Claire Gormley Collier, was diagnosed with ALS in 2004. At that time, Claire was in her early 40s, living in Stamford, Connecticut, roughly the same age as Pauline when Pauline was diagnosed, and had 3 small children. And we didn't really know what ALS was back in 2004, but we immediately, meeting her friends and family, banded together, and we got behind and rallied behind Claire and started an organization called Friends of Claire. Back in those days, our mission was to raise money for awareness, give money to research. We were giving money to Project ALS at the time. And then as well, we were raising money for Claire to keep her at home with her 3 children.
So your background is really that it affected you personally.
It did affect me personally.
And it came from a desire to help. Did you find this organization, or did you come into contact with
CCALS?
Yes.
So what happened was we lost Claire in 2009 to her battle with ALS. And Claire's, she always said what she wanted her legacy to be is what we did for her, to go out there and do it for other families such as Pauline's. Once you get your diagnosis of ALS, you don't really know where to go or who to turn to. The doctors basically tell you have 2 to 5 years, get your affairs in order, and live your life as best you can. But no one's really out there telling the families where to go for resources, where to go for equipment, where to go for support, and how to navigate the insurance, all the insurance debacles that go along with ALS. ALS is a very expensive disease. Annually, it could cost up to about $200,000 per year to live with the disease.
Wow.
Just because we're talking about home care, we're talking about durable medical equipment, we're talking about medications, respiratory equipment, wheelchairs, ramps, the list goes on and on.
What have you come to know about the disease itself? I mean, what is out there now? What is known now versus what was known years ago? What are some attributing causes to ALS? Is there a typical age of onset, trigger, genetic markers and factors?
Sure.
Educate our listeners and viewers a bit on the disease.
Those are really great questions, Jen. So statistically, there's about 30,000 Americans diagnosed with ALS every year. Statistically, about every 90 minutes, someone is diagnosed with ALS, and about every 90 minutes, someone passes away from ALS.
Wow.
About 1 in 300 men will get ALS, and about 1 in 400 women will get ALS.
Really?
Yes.
So, okay.
ALS is a much more common disease than we like to think. The problem is that it's underfunded. There's not enough money going towards research to find the cure. here we are 80 years later after Lou Gehrig was diagnosed and passed away from the disease, and we still don't have a cure.
It's hard to wrap your brain around that.
It is.
And do they ever give a specific etymology of the disease? Do they ever tell you exactly how you develop this, how a person develops this, or do they really only come down to, narrowing it down and some speculation? Is the diagnosis ever,
Well, the
on point?
diagnosis process can be very, very trying because it could take up to a year to find your diagnosis because they want to eliminate everything they possibly can, like foot drop, like Lyme's disease, like MS. The list goes on and on and on before they really determine that it is ALS.
Okay.
And as far as, how a person gets ALS, about 80% of the population is sporadic, so it comes out of nowhere. It comes on with limb onset, a foot drop, or you have your dexterity in your hands, you lose that ability, which is what happened to Pauline in the beginning. She had a hard time going like this with her fingers. And then there's a familiar gene. So there's a SOD1 or a C9 gene that's a familiar gene that goes from generation to generation.
Okay.
And that's about 5 to 10% of the disease.
So it's a
population.
so a genetic component is a seemingly low
It
contributing
is.
factor.
It is, but the research today has come so much further in the past 20 years that they're finding more and more genetic genes that are correlated to ALS.
Okay.
So in Pauline's case particularly, she comes from an Italian genetic background, and she did have a gene connected to her Italian genetics that caused her ALS.
Okay.
Okay, and then there's another form of ALS called bulbar onset, which starts up here in your mouth, and you start to slur, and your body is completely intact. So
Wow.
you start slurring, and people think you're at work and you've been drinking all day when you're not. The muscles in your mouth are starting to weaken, and you have difficulty speaking and swallowing, and that's a much faster progression. Bulbar onset is like 12 to 18 months. And
Wow, and then it just ravages the
and
body.
then it takes over the whole body.
I mean, the disease really, your body fails you for sure. It's
And
just
unfortunately, as we stand today, there are only 2 drugs that slow the progression down,
really.
and there's no cure. And even those drugs that are supposed to slow the disease down really only slow it down by 15 to 20%. So that equates to giving you an extra 6 to 9 months of life.
So the approximate, or the average, duration of illness from the time of diagnosis to mortality is often what?
2 to 5 years.
2 to 5
But
years.
people are living a lot longer today because there's therapies out there, and these are probably terms that are probably foreign to your audience that are listening today. But a non-invasive ventilator, which is a machine that pushes air in and out of your lungs and helps you breathe, that will have you live longer. Using a cough assist and a suction machine to clear out your secretions every day. It's like the brushing of the teeth for your lungs. That can keep you healthy. And then, of course, if people decide that, they do want to live with ALS and they're having trouble with swallowing, getting a feeding tube also can extend your life.
On the flip side of that, you lose the quality of your life.
You do.
Arguably.
You do.
And I think that is what is so hard. And the mind is so intact. I mean, Pauline was always present wherever she was. She wanted to be at everything for her children.
She did.
She knew everything that was going on around her.
More so than most people that were around her.
Yeah.
Like she was on top of everything.
I would agree with that. But you're a prisoner in this body
You're
that's
trapped
shutting
inside
down. You're
your body,
trapped inside
yes.
your body, and that's such a hard thing to reconcile. So being aware, being cognizant, and knowing the limitations and the failure of your own body has to be so emotionally difficult to grapple with. How do you deal with the emotions? I mean, we look at our friends, and they're a strong family for sure.
They are.
I mean, they're
They are.
amazing. But how do you do that? How do you watch the life get drained from someone? What type of support services do you provide for that emotional, mental anguish that they're going through?
So when you have ALS and you lose the ability to walk, and then you lose the ability to talk, or you lose the ability to get dressed or to feed yourself, every time you lose one of those physical abilities, it's like mourning the loss of something that you had and then you don't have anymore. So what I try to do is, my job is not to ever go into a family and say, oh, Pauline or whoever, you have to do this, or I think you should do that. My job is to educate the family and the patient on ALS and what's out there to help the family. And then they can make their decisions. So for example, a feeding tube is a very simple procedure. It's an outpatient procedure. It takes about 30 minutes, but it's a quality of life change. So do you want that feeding tube or you don't? And my job is to respect the wishes of that patient. If they don't want it, then okay.
So to give the option. So you basically, so someone's diagnosed with ALS and they connect to you.
Yes.
And you basically come on board and you're an advocate for the family. You're laying out the options that they have. Like you said, you're not telling them which way to go. You're explaining the options. Do you also explain, the progression of the disease? Because I have to imagine most patients and families who are now dealing with this have no idea what's coming down the road.
Right. So that's a very a personal thing. If people want to know and they have questions for me, of course I'll be very honest and answer those questions. And if some families say, you know what, I want to tap the brakes a little bit here, like I just want to absorb that we have this diagnosis and I don't really want to know what lies ahead, then I respect those wishes of those families. So it's a very individual thing.
So let's talk about what is out there for families suffering from ALS. I see the ALS Therapy Development Institute.
Yes.
Can you explain that?
Sure.
Are there, you hear of some diseases so much with more prevalence, and therefore the resources and support are there.
Right.
This is somewhat of an unknown to so many people.
Right.
So the question is, you get the diagnosis, much like Pauline did. Where do you go? What do you do? So talk about the different agencies out there.
So with Pauline, it was very serendipitous that Pauline she was diagnosed at Columbia, the Eleanor Lou Gehrig Center, at ALS down at Columbia. And I happen to be very connected with the whole team there. And I happen to be at the clinic, one of her first clinic appointments.
Really?
And so a nurse practitioner had asked me to go in and say hi to Pauline and her mother. And that was the first time I met Pauline. And you would not know that she had ALS if you looked at her. And we immediately had a connection because when I found out she was a Homick's middle school teacher, living and growing up in Larchmont, I was a student at Homick. So we had that connection. So, but going back to what you said before, the ALS Therapy Development Institute is a research engine based up in Boston. And all they do is raise money for research. And they have about 30 scientists that all they do every day is work on trying to find a cure for ALS.
So where are we today versus 10 years ago? Because now your work has, you spanned a decade in this.
Right.
Where are we today? Is it a marked difference, a noticeable difference? Are we in the right direction, or are we stuck in neutral?
We're somewhere in between, Jen. But I would say that I have more hope today than I did back in 2004. I've been in this game for almost 17, going on 18 years. And
what was the change for you?
I think what it was social media, to be honest with you.
Okay.
The awareness of social media, and we go back to 2014 and we have the Ice Bucket Challenge.
Yeah, we talked about this morning when I was introducing the show on the morning show, and Dennis mentioned that. And that really, what was the origin of the Ice Bucket Challenge?
So it was, the origin was 3 different young faces of ALS, 3 men. One was Anthony Sinertia.
From Pelham.
He's from Pelham.
Yes, okay.
And then we have Pat Quinn from Yonkers.
Okay.
And then we have Pete Fredes, who was a BC graduate and from Boston.
Okay.
And Jeanette, Anthony's wife, had done one of the first videos, and then it connected to someone on Pat's thread, and then it connected to someone on Pete's thread. And it went absolutely viral.
Absolutely.
And ironically enough, you could walk down the street today and you could poll, say, 10 to 20 people. Maybe half would say, oh, I know the Ice Bucket Challenge. Another half would say, I don't know the Ice Bucket Challenge. And if you said, what was the Ice Bucket Challenge about, they might say ALS or they might not.
Right. They might know the challenge, but they might not know what it was doing. And was there funding behind any of those challenges, or was it really just an awareness campaign?
Do the Ice Bucket Challenge. If you don't do it, you're supposed to donate money to the ALS Association.
Got it. But so again, overall awareness.
It was a movement that raised a couple of $100 million.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Your ability to raise funds had to be severely impacted by COVID, I would imagine.
It was.
Were there, do Do you see a lot of in-person fundraisers? What is the main source of funding? Is it
For my organization, it's all straight donations. So it's all donations from organizations, from families that have passed, people that want to support our cause. And, you know, ALS is a disease that's completely underfunded as far as research goes. So, of course, when someone gets diagnosed with ALS, their first thing is, I want to find the cure. I want to help in finding the cure. But the other piece of it that's huge is the care component, living with the disease, survivorship, and how much money goes into that, and how many resources we need. My organization, you know, we're a non-profit. We don't charge anything for any services. Everything is free of charge. If someone wants to make a donation, we're more than happy and we're grateful for it. But, you know, through Pauline's journey, for example, I was constantly bringing over recliner chairs or Hoyer lifts or commodes or equipment, or something would happen and Pauline Sr. would call and say, we ran out of this, and, you know, I'd drive down and bring it down there.
You were definitely part of that inner circle care team, Chris.
You know, so I was very happy to work with Pauline, and, you know, once again, I think that awareness is a big thing, and we just had on June 2nd, National Lou Gehrig's Day.
You know, when we were sitting there with the family, her cousin Kenny mentioned that was the day when we were sitting together at the funeral home, and how fitting that was.
Yes.
But like you said, that was 80-something years ago that he received that diagnosis.
Right.
So, you know, in one sense, you could say 80 years later, we're not as far ahead as we should be. What are they discussing to come down the pipeline? I mean, do we think that this is something that is going to be, you know, drugs to sustain life, or drugs to prevent, you know, something that can change the course if a diagnosis if it's early detection?
They're hoping to find a treatment that will, you know, reverse the disease or slow it down dramatically. Right now, there's a Healy platform trial, which is based out of MGH up in Boston, but it's being rolled out to a lot of ALS centers throughout the United States, where you take multiple you take multiple drugs and you try to see if they work at the same time, and then you might have some that have a placebo effect.
Right.
And then there's also a bill that's being passed for compassionate use and expanded access, where if there's a drug that's not FDA approved, you can have access to it. But the only problem there is, you know, to get one of those off-label drugs could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Right.
So
then
you're back to, you know, if you don't
comes in.
have those financial resources, then that's not eligible to you.
That's so hard. Can you explain to listeners and viewers, obviously there are many distinctions between MS and ALS. I don't know if you could really say you hear of one more than the other, but like you say, as they run the gamut of trying to eliminate what the disease can't be, and then they usually get to ALS. Can you explain some key distinctions between MS and ALS?
Well, you know, I consider they're all motor neuron diseases, first of all. So I consider them all cousin diseases.
Okay.
So you have MS, and then you have someone like Parkinson's, and then something like ALS. So unfortunately, my father passed of Parkinson's disease.
My grandmother as well.
Okay.
17 years. And it was
15 years with my father.
Again, prisoner in your own body, because the mind, my grandmother was very sharp and very aware, but her body just failed her.
Right. So at the end, the outcome is all the same. The way at the end, it's a really, really tragic passing. But as far as distinctions, you know, MS is a very slow progressing disease, and you can live with it for 20, 25 years. Not as long with Parkinson's. And then ALS is the ultimate, you know, of all those motor neuron diseases. It's just a fast progressing disease. And, you know, like I said, unfortunately, ALS, as we stand today, ALS will always win.
Do we find that the increase in case numbers comes from the fact that doctors are just better able to diagnose now, or is there something environmental that's attributed, a possible attribution to why we see more cases? Because even from my perspective in the funeral home, I see it more as well. Is it just because we know what it is and it has a name and a face more so now? Or are there, again, environmental contributing factors to the increase of cases on the rise?
I would say all of the above. I definitely think there's some environmental components.
What could one of those be?
But those haven't been proven scientifically yet. So there's a lot of there's a lot of theory behind it, but medically it hasn't been approved. But I think that, and then the genetic piece of it, we're finding more and more genetic components. And I also just think, like, the big thing is the awareness, Like, I've been doing this for 17 years, and I get phone calls on the daily of, my friend, my cousin, my aunt.
Right.
And you help this person, now this other person has it.
No, you're a walking angel among us. And on that note, Lisa is texting me to share that the Cardillo Criollo family is extremely grateful to you, Chris, and the love and support that you've given in the entire organization.
Well, thank you.
You
Lisa.
made quite a difference. Lisa, thank you for sharing that, and he truly is amazing.
I love the Cardillo family, and they'll be stuck with me forever. I'm not going anywhere.
No, but they're the type of people that when you're in their circle,
Right.
like, we all get stuck with you, Lisa, but we're very happy about that.
Right.
So, but I can't imagine, because there's such a compassionate, it's such a great name for your organization, because there's such a compassionate component about you. And what you watched was very trying. When you see a mom with 2 kids like Pauline, when you see her mom and her sister, who's another walking angel and saint on earth, I don't know how can you, it has to be hard sometimes to separate that there's a job you have to do there for them, because the emotions weigh so heavy. It's awful to see. And when you look, at pictures of Pauline and this beautiful woman, that she was always a beautiful woman, but when you watch in the 6-year time span what it did to her, that has to weigh on you at some point. So as a caregiver, I commend you.
Thank you, John.
You're working in a heavy subject matter for sure.
Well, I mean, you can relate, obviously. You can relate.
A little bit.
ALS is the type of disease that, it doesn't take a holiday, I always say. It doesn't discriminate. It doesn't matter whether you're young or old. It doesn't matter what the color of your skin. It doesn't matter whether you're male or female. My youngest patient was 14, and my oldest was 90, and I've had everything in between.
And everything in between.
Everything in between.
What do you want the message to be today? What do you want people watching and viewing the show to know? Do you want them to get involved and donate? Do you want them to reach out to someone that they know who has ALS and connect them to you?
Absolutely.
All of the above?
All of the above.
How do we find you? And how can we donate? Is there anything upcoming, or is there a portal through the website?
Yes, you can donate to CCALS.org on our website and make a donation there. And you can go to our event page and see some of the events that we have coming up. Our organization is based out of West Falmouth, Massachusetts, so a lot of events happen up in Massachusetts.
Okay.
I cover the area, obviously, down here because I live here in Larchmont.
Okay.
But we will be doing some events here in New York as well. We had some planned pre-COVID that we had to kind of put aside. We were going to do a big launch of opening up CCALS down here in New York, Connecticut, New Jersey.
Really?
But we had to table that for now due to COVID.
Well, listen,
so once
keep
that
me
comes
posted
back,
on that
yeah,
for sure.
absolutely,
I want to be a part of that as well. CCALS.org. And I think it's important, again, like you say, when you receive this diagnosis, there's so many questions. What do I do? Where do I go? And it's a disease that impacts the family unit. It's going to affect everybody connected to that
Jen,
patient.
that's an excellent point. It just doesn't affect the patient. It affects the whole entire family.
Yeah.
And it really can take a family down if they're not really intact.
It's
and
so
I've seen it decimate families, and I've also seen it bring families even closer together.
It could go one way or the other, but they should reach out. People should know that you are here. So if anybody listening out there has a friend or relative who, even if it's not a new diagnosis, if they've been suffering for years, please connect to Chris. I can't stress that enough. CCALS. You have a very simple email address, chris@ccals.org. Tim, when we close the show, if you can put this up in the comment section, his information, that would be wonderful. Yeah, and Lisa, we're not going anywhere for you. It's great to do it, multitasking today. I got your card, I got my phone, we got a lot going on here. But watching this, I had never known anyone affected with ALS. And like I said, I've seen a few other families come this year. Obviously, I have a friendship with this family. It's so hard to see. And all you want to do is do something. So I hope today that we're getting a message out there, because I know Pauline would have wanted to do good for others.
She would always want to pay it forward.
She certainly did.
She did some really amazing stuff while she was alive. One year, she put together a toy drive. Another family, the Caraquel family, put a toy drive together for Anthony and Pauline. And then we had a close-knit group of families that were,
they're bonded by
Westchester,
circumstance, right?
Westchester.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, Pauline was the last one standing, and she said to me after Pat Quinn had passed away, she said, "Chris, you have to find me a new ALS friend, because everybody's gone." And she would go to each one of those wakes, and
she certainly.
she was she was an amazing person. She's going to be truly missed.
We hope that she's resting in the peace that she deserves.
Yes.
Watching over her beautiful children and family. Pauline, we love you.
We
Lisa
love you,
and Pauline, you're listening. We love you guys too. CCALS is the organization. I'm speaking with Chris Curtin. I hope everyone connects to you somehow if they're in need of support. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you, Jen.
And this is Jen Graziano. Thanking you for taking the time to listen as we took the time to talk. Have a great day, Westchester. Bye-bye.